world nobles, slaves, human shops, against the purity of these upper classes, the villains of the world look positively humane in comparison. It's because the world's in the hands of scum like them that it's all screwed to hell. I mean, we're not the nicest guys, but at least we're honest about it. So I kind of figured a lot of different YouTubers right now are doing kind of retrospective on the Kid Pirates and Eustace Kid and Killer and Heat and Wire and insert the names of all the other ones that I haven't memorized yet. Mosh, UK, Bubblegum, I don't remember. Other ones, I don't remember. But I kind of thought I'd do a retrospective a little bit. I mean, like, I know a lot of people are probably at this point in time, and I just kind of wanted to do one as well, since I haven't really talked about Kid and the Kid Pirates and Killer and stuff like that on this channel before. Not really beyond like the little bit that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, and we saw that they were arriving at Elbath, and we're going to have to deal with Shanks. I haven't really talked about them. I know I made Kid's Devil Fruit out of beads, and I have a Smile Devil Fruit that I made out of beads, so that technically represents Killer as well, but I wanted to do a video about them since I haven't done a video in regards to them, since, you know, this is kind of one of the last hurrahs we're going to get to talk about them, unless somehow we get some additional information in like an SBS, or if they happen to show up at, you know, at some point in time in the series again. And I'll go over my thoughts for like if that might happen, or if it will or won't happen, or whatever, how that could happen after I go through and talk about them. So the quote that I had at the beginning is kind of about Kid's worldview, just kind of how he tends to view the world and stuff like that. And yes, admittedly, unlike, you know, the world nobles and everything like that that hold themselves above everybody, at least, at the very least, Kid and Killer, and, you know, Kid specifically admits that he's not a nice person. He's not trying to be a nice person. We know he did not go up against Kaido and Big Mama Onigashima because it would free Wano. He did it for his own personal glory and his own ego, as opposed to Luffy that was doing it because he was trying to help Wano. And also, you know, Kid was doing it because he wanted to help Wano as well, because he saw how much they were suffering. Kid was just doing it out of his own vanity, and revenge for Kaido defeating him and Killer. So I just wanted to go over stuff about the Kid Pirates, go over what we've seen of them, the main crew members that we, of course, interact with. We, of course, have the captain, who is, of course, Eustace Captain Kidd. As I mentioned before, could use a better epitaph. I guess whoever was in charge of that on the day wasn't up to coming up with a good name for him. Killer got the better answer. Kid is 23 years old. I believe I got that correct when I was going through and marking down stuff. He was born in the South Blue. We do not know the name of the island. We just know that it is unaffiliated with the world government. He has the Jiki no Mi, or like the magnet fruit, that I do like the design of. And I mean, being able to control, you know, magnetism and metal and stuff like that the way that he can is a pretty useful skill, I would say. In that regard, I would say that tends to be a good skill. And such. And admittedly, okay, so yeah, we know that Killer, or Kid, you know, because he can't swim because of his devil fruit and everything like that, should he fall into the ocean, if he has metal around him, he can pull the metal to him and make himself float on top of the metal, depending on how large amount of metal there is for him to use. And as long as it doesn't get too heavy and he sinks, but, you know, ideas there. And we do know that Kid has all 3 types of haki. This was confirmed via additional things that Oda has said, or stuff that is stated in the manga. So he has, you know, observation and armament and Conqueror's haki, although I do not think we've actually seen Kid show off his Conqueror's haki. One thing, so I'm just going to mention this now, and I'll probably mention it again later. We know that right now in the anime, they're getting close, you know, they're dealing with the fights between Kid and Law versus Big Mom. And an additional scene that I wouldn't mind if they threw in was Big Mom and Killer and Kid, having like this clash of conquerors hockey, because we've seen Luffy have clashes of conquerors hockey with Katakuri and Doflamingo and Kaido and such. So those are what we've seen Luffy's hockey able to do, and with Bullet and Stampede and stuff. Having Kid get to show off the fact that he does have conquerors hockey would at least be a nice development for the character, and something like that they could show off in the anime. Just have it can just be an additional scene. It doesn't have to be major. Just something that shows that he does have Conqueror's hockey, not learning to use it like Luffy does with like advanced Conqueror's hockey and stuff like that, but at least having like this clash of Conqueror's hockey between him and Big Mom would be an interesting thing, I would say. Just to show that he does have it. I would be okay with that. I don't know how many other people would be okay with it, but I would at least be okay with it. But I don't know if they're going to add that in the anime or not. But, just something that shows that he does have it. And then we have Master Soldier Killer, who is the second in command of the Kid Pirates. And I actually like Killer a lot more than I like Kid, because Killer at least seems level-headed at times, whereas Kid is just, you laughed at my coat, now you're stuck up on a cross, or I pinned you to the ground and you're not going anywhere anymore. So yeah, I like Killer a little bit better, and he definitely got the better epitaph, Master Soldier Killer, out of him and Kid, I would say. He's 27 years old, also from the South Blue, from the same island that Kid, Heat, and Wire are from. And he does have a failed smile. And so we know that because he runs around as Kamazo, and it's revealed he has the fakes, or the failed smile, so he can smile and smile and laugh and laugh and laugh, but that, Killer doesn't like his laugh, and Kid didn't like Killer's laugh, and, since Killer never liked his laugh, Kid didn't like his laugh either. And I think it was stated now, in the most recent SBS, that Oda has stated that, like, no, there wasn't a cure that they were able to find for the smiles, for the failed smiles, to help them. That might be something that Chopper can come up with later on, which would be a very nice thing to do. But again, that's not what Oda was trying to point out with the smiles, as an aftermath type of a thing. But the Kid Pirates, them hopefully becoming a bit more of a jovial crew, and hopefully helping Killer and stuff like that with that would be a nice thing to see. Again, additional scene that they could add in the anime, depending on what else we end up seeing later on down the line. And then of course we have Heat and Wire, who are the other two main Kid Pirates that we've seen. But I looked and I double checked and I couldn't find anything about how old they were. I know their birthdays are listed, but they're probably around the same age as like Kid and Killer, so somewhere in that range. And then in regards to the crew's relationships that they seem to have with each other, or at the very least that Kid seems to show with his crew. Obviously, the one on the crew that he has the best relationship with is Killer. And I'll go into a little bit more of their backstory in a moment. But, Kid and Killer are very loyal to each other. Killer has pretty much just bet all of his chips on Killer, or at Kid, on Kid at this point. It's just like, I put it all on Red. I put it all on Kid. And, you can't fault him for that. This is his captain. This is a guy that's proven himself to Killer multiple times. They used to be rival gangs, and then now they're, all working together along with Heat and Wire and everything. So they have a pretty good dynamic. And when Kid found out that Killer had been given the smile, and had to become Kamazo and everything like that, Kid was very angry on Killer's behalf, which I find very, at least somewhat of a redeeming quality for Kid. He was never one of my favorite supernovas, even way back before everything happened with Wano. I still didn't particularly care for Kid. I still liked Killer better. Sorry, Kid. I'm sorry. But, and we know that the reason that Killer ate the smile fruit was because Orochi said, well, if you eat this and you get a good power, then maybe you can use it to defeat Kaido and save Kid. And we know that it ended up being a failed smile fruit, which, considering what Killer would have looked like as like the weird elephant one, I kind of say he maybe got the slightly better end of the stick deal on that, because no, I don't see that as a form that Killer can particularly take the best advantage of, in that regard. Sorry, Killer. I don't know if you'd be able to work with that or not. But so there's that and everything that goes along with Kid and Killer for that relationship, and their bond that they show there between the two of them. And as I said, Killer just puts all of his faith in Kid in regards to like Kid being able to take down Big Mom and Kaido and everything like that when he's dealing with Hawkins, which I'll go over. The main rivals, of course, that deal with that the Kid Pirates have are, of course, pretty much the rest of the Worst Generation and the Supernovas and stuff like that. Mainly specifically against, Law and Luffy, since those are the other two that, like, we always see them paired up together a lot of the time. At Sabaody, they all kind of fought against each other, at the auction house, or help fight against the Marines, at the auction house and stuff, which was a pretty good way of showing off, like, Kid's power and then Law's power. So I do like how they did that, and how they just kind of, like, showing these different, rivalry very much between those three. Also, out of all of them, Law is definitely the smartest. And as much as I love Law, I would say Luffy is definitely stronger than Law in regards to raw power, but Law would possibly be like the better tactician in regards to like having to fight against Luffy. Then again, Luffy and Kid, Luffy versus Kid would also be an interesting fight had that happened at any point in time, which it didn't. But I'm pretty sure that Luffy's crew probably could have handled Kid's crew pretty easily had they ended up having to have a fight between the two of them. Because between, we know that Heat can breathe fire, and I don't know what Wire does. He has a pitchfork, and then, of course, Killer and Zoro would have a pretty good fight. But I'm pretty sure the rest of the crew would be easily taken care of between Nami and Usopp in regards to their, like, very widespread attacks with Nami's elemental attacks, and with Usopp's plants, and with Robin's, limbs and stuff, just, like, incapacitating everyone. I don't think there would be a huge amount of an issue in regards to those two. But Luffy versus Kid would be an interesting fight. I would have to admit that. And then in regards to, I did want to talk about their ship. So their ship is called the Victoria Punk, which I actually do like the design of their ship. It's really cool. It's got like this weird dinosaur mouth thing on it that I like. We know, or it was revealed to us, that, well, I think at one point in time when the ship's name was revealed, I don't think we knew yet about like Kid and Killer's childhood friend. But I think that a lot of people assumed that it was named after like Queen Victoria. Just because, punk and stuff like that, like Victoria Punk and stuff like that was just like something in there that I was just like, I think a lot of people thought that. And then there was the reveal that, Kid and Killer, when they were kids, they were friends with this girl, Victoria. I am going to butcher her other two names. I apologize. Hiruton Duruyun Nakai. Sorry. That translates, well, as Grand Line Review Liam says, broth splutterina. I'd pick Victoria out of those names. Thank you very much. That they had this crush on her when they were kids. Kid and Killer did. And at one point in time, she spilled udon on herself, curry udon on her, and they laughed at her, and then she beat them up. And then she was just like, beat them up and didn't want to be friends with them anymore. And now that is, curry udon is now Kid and Killer's both least favorite food because of that. And when Kid and Killer became pirates, after part of a backstory I'm going to go over in a second, they ended up naming their ship after her, the Victoria Punk. And you can assume via that way that she died, or she would be on the crew if she hadn't died, which is an interesting what-if scenario. I don't necessarily think it would have made a whole lot of difference in the matter, but it would have been interesting to see this, have her be part of the crew and see how she interacted with the rest of the crew. Like, see how, maybe she would have eaten the Jiki Jiki no Mi instead of Kid. I doubt that, because that seems to be a pretty good one for him to have. But going into more of the backstory, the history that we get for Kid and Killer and Heat and Wire, as I mentioned, they were all born on an island in the South Blue, yet to be named island, unaffiliated with the world government, so it doesn't have protection from the Marines. So the island was basically run by different gangs in different cities and different sections and stuff like that. And I was trying to think if there was any of the Straw Hats that grew up in any place like that, but not that we're aware of yet. Not that we're aware of, or we haven't really seen too many other places that are like this at the moment. Not that we haven't seen islands that aren't affiliated with the world government, but at the moment, and I don't think we're ever going to get the name for the island that Kid and Killer and such are from, but we could at some point in time, if Oda ever does at the end of the series, just like, yeah, oh, this person's from this and this, but yeah. They all grew up on the island, and as I said, Kid and Killer both had the crush on Victoria, and then she beat them up because they laughed at her after she spilled the curry udon on herself. And then several years later, Kid, Killer, Heat, and Wire are all these bosses of different ruling gangs on the island, and different towns on the island. And then Victoria ends up getting murdered by this other gang, not one that's associated with their group, but by this other rival gang. And I wonder, I'm thinking like Kid and Killer and Heat and Wire, like maybe like the four of them kind of like, their gangs like, okay, we have their territories, we respect each other to a degree, and we're not going to fight against each other unless something happens. Like, they're a little bit more like amicable with each other, and maybe had some form of like, okay, some form of, not like a peace, but at least a less dangerous place to live, maybe. And we see that, or we're told that Victoria was killed, and Kid, Killer, Heat, and Wire, like they all teamed up with their gangs, and they all just went and they like obliterated the other gang that was the reason she died. And then they're just like, okay, I'm sick of being on this island. Let's go. We're gonna go be pirates. They call themselves the Kid Pirates with Kid as the captain. They have their ship built. They call it the Victoria Punk. It's never stated out exactly how long they've had the ship. They may have started off with a different ship. Like, the Straw Hats started off with the Going Merry, and then end up down the line, maybe they need to get a new ship. I doubt their ship had a Club Haltermon, but it could have. We don't know. But then they ended up, getting a new ship at some point in time. And then they named that Victoria Punk. And then they've been working their way through the seas up to this point in time. We know at some point in time that when Ace was on Wano 4 years ago, when he was talking with, Yamato and everything, he mentioned Kid as one of these pirates. It was like up and coming and everything. So we know that Kid was already making a name for himself when he was about 19 or so. Also, I think it was pointed out by someone, I think it was actually Grand Line Review, that Kid was born in the South Blue, and that was where they were searching for a kid that could have been Rogers, searching for Ace and Rouge. And that Kid actually would have been born within the time frame that they would have been looking for, Ace and Rouge. So don't know what to put that. I know there's like this whole, I know that like Roger had a video about that, but I don't remember what it was, where he mentioned that in one of the videos. And I'm like, well, yeah, that would be an interesting thing. But I don't remember if there's anything else that goes along with that. Like they don't ever state like how he wasn't found, since it wasn't affiliated with the world government. Maybe they didn't have a reason to go to the island. We don't know. But we do know that I think we are told what island Rouge was from and where Ace was born, but I cannot remember the name of the island, so I apologize for that. But moving on throughout the story, we know that Kid and Killer, the Kid Pirates get into the Grand Line at some point in time. Either they enter through Reverse Mountain like the rest of the Kid, like the rest of the Supernovas did, or something along those lines. They end up in the Grand Line, and, they take a different path on the log post than what Luffy and the others did. And, them, along with the rest of the Supernovas, travel their way through all the way up to Saba-Odi Archipelago. And we know by this point in time that Kid is actually the one that has the highest bounty out of the worst generation at this point in time. And that was 315 million berries. Kids or Killers was a bit lower. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was like somewhere around, I think, the same one as like what Zoro had at that point in time. And of course, just like Luffy and Zoro, Kid and Killer are on the same crew, and they're both supernovas. Um, and so they caused a lot of devastation. And I believe that it is Shaki who says that, well, the one who's on this island that actually has the bigger bounty out of Luffy and them is Kid. And out of all the supernovas is Kid. And that's more just because of how violent and brutal he is as he goes to different islands. And how much he's just like caused all this chaos and everything. Yeah, we know that Luffy's bounty was pretty damn high at that point in time for what we've seen for bounties because of the fact that he had gone up against the world government. He challenged the world government and shot down their flag in order to get Robin back at Enies Lobby. So that's why his bounty was so high, or at least one of the reasons. Also, at that point in time, as I stated in the chapter review, that he defeated 2 warlords at this point in time. But I don't think they've upped his bounty after defeating Moria yet. Probably didn't want to reveal that to the world that he defeated another warlord. But so Kid is stated to be much more violent than Luffy and stuff. And there's instances where Kid and Luffy have similar personalities, and then there's ones where they differ vastly. And that is very well shown at Wano, and then later on, very much shown, with the way that Kid and Killer are kind of ended at the moment with where they are currently in the story. So what we see during the whole Saba Odi arc, we know that Kid and Apu and Killer kind of have like this little, Killer kind of fights against, I think it's Drake. And then I think it's, Kid has like something against Apu or something like that. And then, they kind of witness what happens with Charlos, because we know that Law and Kid and their crews were both at the auction house when Luffy and the others were there trying to save Kami, and they witnessed, they saw Rayleigh free Kami, they saw Luffy punch Charlos, and so they were witness to a lot of that. And then by a technicality, the 3 captains kind of team up in order to kind of help everybody escape from the auction house and deal with all the Marines that showed up there. So we do get this great entrance where we get to see, Kid using his power of, making the giant mechanical arm and then just swatting the Marines with it after he pulls in all of their guns and swords and whatever other metal scraps are just lying around. A lot of people think that Kid may also be somewhat of the shipwright for the Victoria Punk, which I can see why a lot of people think that, because he does seem to be very mechanically minded. Also, we see, later on, he is kind of the one that, makes up the rail gun that he does in regards to, that's Dan Punk, where he makes the giant freaking rail gun. And, you have to have some form of, an understanding of the way that, mechanics work in order to do that, in order to make that. So, Kid having that type of knowledge is probably something that he developed. We know that when Kid was a kid, that he seemed to have this little robot toy that he played with. So maybe it was something where he either made it or something along those lines, where Kid may be rather smart in that regard, but that just means he's very technology minded or technical minded in that regard, mechanically minded. So him and Frankie could possibly get along in that regard. Would be kind of an interesting thing, although Kid versus Frankie would also be an interesting fight, just because Frankie is also, he's a cyborg, he's got metal in him, so we don't know exactly what'll happen, if that would have been an interesting fight. But we know that, he's there, he sees Luffy punch Charlos, they all get out of the auction house and everything, and then we know that, Kid and Law at one point in time do have to deal with, one of the pacifistas that show up. I don't think they have to deal with Kuma specifically, but I do know that they have to fight against one of the pacifistas when it does show up, to, go against Luffy and stuff like that, or, try to, when they show up, to try to capture Luffy and stuff after he punched Charlos. Which, given Kid's whole take on the world that I mentioned at the beginning, I would assume that he would take a fair amount of, rather deserved pleasure in seeing Luffy punch out Charlos. I would like to hope he would take some form of glee in that, because yes, as the audience, we're just introduced to these characters and stuff like that, and Luffy may not have had a huge amount of idea of like who the celestial dragons were up to that point in time, but Kid may have known much better about who the celestial dragons were, since his country was not affiliated with the world nobles. With the world government, he may have known that, oh, well, I know who the world nobles are, and I'm aware of all of this stuff. I just kind of don't care. But he may have still taken a great amount of pleasure in seeing Luffy punch out Charlos. Or at least I would think that he would. Or at the very least, there's a fair amount of glee in it, which seems like something Kid would enjoy watching. Law may have gotten a bit of a happiness out of it as well, just because he has, a pretty good idea of how the, stuff that happens with celestial dragons and stuff like that because of his backstory, with Doflamingo and Roshinate and everything. But, later we know that, Kid and his crew, after Luffy and the Straw Hats are all set, all over the world, that Kid and his crew do kind of, fight against the pacifista laws there as well. And then, eventually they are able to escape them because, all the pacifistas are like called away, or however it ends up going. Because like the Straw Hats are gone, so the rest of the pacifistas like, well, the Straw Hats are gone, and Bertha, Kuma got rid of them, so I guess we'll, go off and do this or whatever. The next time we see them, Kid and his crew, manage to escape the pacifistas, of course, and they are watching the live broadcast of Ace's execution, and they do, watch the execution and everything in the aftermath of the battle that happens at Marineford, and then they actually set sail at one point, and because we know that Sabaody itself isn't exceedingly far away from Marineford, they actually sail by the battle as it's happening, and they, head off. They get ready to head off into the New World and everything, and eventually we know at some point in time during this time frame when they first show up, Kid and his crew fight against this other random pirate crew. I don't know if they're ever named, but they do fight against them on one of the islands in the New World, and Kid can start showing his prowess. They basically crucify this other pirate crew, and well, they do name them, but I don't really care what they're named. But he pins him up and crucifies the crew using his devil fruit powers and stuff. And this is after stuff happens with Luffy and the Oxbell and stuff like that. And of course, Kid is there alongside him for all of this, as are Heat and Wire and other crew members that had yet to be named at that point in time. During the time skip, it is told to us that at some point in time, Kid did go up against Shanks, and in that time frame, he lost his left arm, and it's via stuff we've learned now that seems to be something that he lost it because of Ben Beckman, not because of Shanks. And of course, at some point in time, Kid, Killer, Apu, and Hawkins all got together, and we're debating, we're discussing forming an alliance. But we also know that Kid also fought against one of the Sweet Commanders in Big Mom's territory, and he actually defeated them and got a copy of the Road Poneglyph. Why they had a copy of the Road Poneglyph on with one of the Sweet Commanders, we have no idea. That has never been explained to us. We just know that he got a copy of one of the Road Poneglyphs. And then he had to flee afterwards. It's thought that he defeated Snack, but we're not sure about that because it's never been stated. We know during Punk Hazard, he was watching the broadcast. Him and Killer were watching the broadcast of Caesar's weapon of mass destruction and everything like that via the Denden Mushi and everything. So we know that he was watching that, and he seemed interested in that. But as far as we're aware, he never ended up wanting to invest in it. And then we know that he ended up having, of course, the alliance, or attempting to form the alliance between himself, Apu and Hawkins and their crews to go up against Shanks. We learn later on what happened during this time frame. We know that during this moment is when Kaido showed up, because he decided to jump off of an island for reasons that are exceedingly just, okay, you have issues, man, go find a therapist. You have issues, giant dragon fish man with horns and a Zanoni and a giant mallet. Go find a therapist and actually talk to the therapist. Don't just like hurt the therapist. Talk to the therapist. Oh God, I don't know if I want to be Kaido's therapist. That would be just an undertaking and a half. Although I don't think I'd want to be Kid's therapist either. In all honesty, that doesn't seem like something I'd particularly want to be. We know that during this time frame, we don't really hear a whole lot about during Kid and Killer and stuff like that during the rest of the Punk Hazard saga and Dressrosa. We get some bits here and there. It's just like, well, they tried to fight against Kaido and they failed, and Hawkins joined Kaido, and Ozapu, of course, was the traitor. And then Kid and Killer did try to fight against Kaido, but that didn't work. Kid ended up getting thrown into Udon prison later on. And of course, we know that during this time frame, Killer ended up, via Orochi was like, forced/tricked into eating the Smile Devil Fruit, and it failed, and he just, smiles now, and then he got turned into Kamazo. I don't remember exactly why. I know that he got turned into Kamazo, and that he was he kind of became like this killer that roamed around the capital. But I'm assuming it was at like Orochi's behest is probably my kind of just like, oh, I don't like this person anymore. Go kill them. So yeah. Also, I don't remember what Kamazo is supposed to translate to in Japanese, like what it equates out to meaning. I don't remember. I didn't look it up. But it's just like, I do like the fact that Killer goes from having these mechanized scythe blades that spin around and everything like that on his wrist. That I actually really like Killer's weapons. Like just those buzzsaw blades are actually pretty cool in my opinion. To having actual scythes, like two giant scythes that he like swings around and uses and stuff like that. So I actually kind of like how they do that. In that regard, Wano, for him becoming Kamazo, I do like that design. That design aesthetic that they did with that. We know that, after, the end of the first act of Wano, Luffy gets thrown into Udon prison, and that's where he sees Kid. And, into the second act of Wano, that's when we're introduced to Kamazo and him fighting against Zoro and everything, and getting defeated by Zoro. It's actually a pretty good battle, even in the manga, and then in the anime, they did a pretty good job with it. I do like how they did that battle, and, Zoro just kind of gets, Kamazo knocked out. Not revealed to us at this point in time that it's supposed to be Killer. I don't remember if that was something that people figured out pretty quickly or not. I can't remember if I was reading weekly at that point in time. I might have been reading weekly again at that point in time. I don't remember. Because I've gone on and off of like reading weekly and like not and back and forth and stuff like that over the years. But now I'm just like, no, I'm reading weekly. I want to find out what's happening. But, and we know this during this time frame that Kid and Luffy are the two, like, the best prisoners by a technicality, in the fact that they are the ones that are doing a huge amount of work and stuff like that. And like, there's a huge amount of production going on. Production definitely skyrocketed during the time frame that Kid and Luffy were there in the prison. And of course, they're getting all the different dongo and everything like that so they can eat. And I'm just like, I don't want to do the math of like how many blocks they've moved, how much they've done at this point in time in order to get money, in order to get the dongo coupons and everything like that. I don't want to know. That is stuff I would never want to do. But also during this time frame, Kid and Luffy are actually getting a pretty good workout in the fact that they are able to actually, physically train and stuff like that. They don't have access to their devil fruit powers at this point in time because of the Sea Prism Stone handcuffs, but they are still able to physically move around and still physically like improve their strength. So I know people have done the equation of like, oh, you use like a training sword when you're training to learn how to fight with a sword. You use a training sword because initially you don't want to like actually hurt yourself while you're training. You don't want to like cut yourself or cut your opponent while you're training until you're much better. Also, a training sword is heavier generally, depending on the type of sword you're going to be using, than a real sword. So that way it gets you stronger and builds up your muscles. And the same thing happens with like, training bats and practice bats and stuff like that when it comes to baseball, like warm-up bats and stuff like that. So what Luffy and Kid basically did for like, the amount of time that they were in Udon was, they physically trained their muscles and got stronger during that time frame, since they couldn't use their devil fruit powers. They had to use their own raw strength. And we know that they had to deal with Dobon in this type of setup as well, and they kind of ended up in his mouth for whatever reason, and they just knocked him out and then got out of the hippo. And then, of course, while they're there, they have to deal with Caribou, who is an idiot. He's an idiot, but he's a useful idiot at times. And this is when Kid clarifies about, no, Big Mom did not take my arm. I beat her sweet commander and took her poneglyph. He doesn't mention taking the poneglyph, but he's like, no, I beat her sweet commander. Shanks is the reason I don't have this arm anymore. I don't have my left arm anymore. It's Shanks's fault, not Big Mom's. So we get that clarification there. We also just see these like moments where we see Kid and Luffy just being exceedingly competitive with each other, and going back and forth with who's the stronger one and who got more dongo and stuff like that. So yeah. Later it's revealed that Kid managed to escape at some point in time. And Luffy was just kind of, waiting in the prison. Like, he's like, well, admittedly, they both did training in the prison, and Luffy did more training in the prison. And of course, Luffy got help from, Hiragoro and everything like that. We also know that, when Kid and Kamazo, revealed to be Killer, were brought back to the prison when they were captured again, it was kind of more like Kid was like, okay, I want answers as to who did this to Killer, who gave him this smile and who made him this way. I want answers, so we're going back to the prison because I demand answers is kind of what happened. So we have that interaction that happens there. And then Kid and Killer both end up getting, going through water torture via Queen. And Luffy doesn't necessarily like Kid, but I don't think that he particularly wants to watch Kid have to go through this, but he's having to deal with his own issue at that point in time. And then, of course, Big Mom shows up, and while she's running around, Kid and Killer get, like, knocked out of the water torture thing, so they're at least not in the water torture thing anymore. And then, during all of the chaos that happens with that, Raizo, manages to toss Kid the keys, and him and Killer are able to release themselves from being tied up and from their sea prism stone handcuffs and everything, which, the cuffs definitely affect Kid. I was trying to remember, I'm pretty sure that they have mentioned that the handcuffs also still affect people who have eaten Smiles. So they would affect Toko and a bunch of the other people in, the villages, what was it? Oh God, name of the town. Ebisu. Sorry, I was just like, I know the name of this town, Ebisu. All the ones that are in Ebisu and everything that were eaten, that ate the Smiles and everything like that. Like, all of them, have now lost their ability to swim. And, there should be affected by the handcuffs, and, Killer is affected by the handcuffs now as well. Which, slight note, because it had not been revealed yet at the time when they were doing Stampede, it had not been revealed that Killer had eaten a failed Smile at that point in time. In film Red, or in Stampede, we do know that when the Supernova fight against Bullet, that, Kid and Killer get knocked into the water, and Killer is able to save Kid because, it had not been revealed that he had eaten a devil fruit at that point in time, that he had eaten the failed Smile, so they were able to get away with that in the movie, in regards to the time frame that it came out, or at least within the time frame that they would have been working on it. and stuff. And then, so now if they did that, then no, Killer would not have been able to save Kid had they fallen into the water in that time frame. But we do know that, Kid and Killer, once they're free, they go and find the rest of their crewmates and everything like that. I would assume that they were just like scattered around Wano or something like that, because it's never stated where the rest of them were, like where Heat and Wire were during this time frame. Were they just like left on Wano somewhere? Because like I'm pretty sure Kid and Killer did not leave Wano, find their crewmates, and then come back to, well, okay. And honestly, in regards to Pride, I wouldn't put it past Kid for wanting to do that. But we know that they show up on the day of the Fire Festival at the same time that Luffy's crew and Law's crew show, and the Heart Pirates show up, and all the rest of the ninjas and samurai and everything like that are showing up to help Kinemon's group and stuff. And we see them all show up at the same time, or well, they show up first. The three, Kid, Law, and Luffy show up first with their crews and deal with a whole bunch of the beast pirates that have showed up, as well as shown up to deal with Kinemon and his group. And they're able to dispatch the beast pirate ships pretty dang easily. And we get to see Kid, and during the anime they got some pretty good intros there. Was showing like Kid's crew and Law's crew, like showing the crews got pretty good entrances, which I like how they did that. And also it's just funny watching all three of them having to deal with each other, with like trying to one up each other. And of course, in the opening that they have during this time frame, they have Kid, Law, and Luffy like vying for like the center the spotlight in the opening, which is just funny in and of itself, which I like. That's definitely something that they do, because it's something that happens in the actual series, where they're just like competing with each other for like who's the center point of attention, who got the most kills, who got the better who got the better attack, who took down the most people. Oh, I took out this ship faster than you took out your ship. All of that just like rivalry that the three of them have, which is just hilarious. And then when they arrive at Onigashima, during this time frame, of course, is when Kinemon does like the, his clothing jutsu, and, turns all of them, gives them all like the beast pirate outfits, which pretty much just look like stuff that Kid and his crew would wear anyway, in all honesty. I've been trying to figure out if I could do a Victoria's Secret joke in here, but I just, because it looks like BDSM stuff that all the beast pirates wear, like they put Kid in them, and then Victoria because of Victoria Punk. I was trying to figure out how to do a Victoria's Secret joke here, but I couldn't come up with one, so I just move on. But so at that point in time, Law tried to explain the plan. Kid ran off, and then Luffy tried to go off after Law, so Kid ran off after Kid, so Kid would not cause a problem, and then Zoro ran off after them. Still baffled that Zoro did not get lost in this time frame, or at least not exceedingly lost. But Law's like, yeah, I already took the idiots into an account. We're okay. This still follows the plan. Come on, get in the submarine. We'll go around. We'll go around in the back. You guys go through that way. I'm used to Luffy's brain. We're good at this point in time. Or I'm more used to Luffy's brain. We're good. And during this time frame, Kid and Killer do end up making their way into the main hall. And when Kid finds Apu, he of course immediately attacks Apu, which is understandable given the fact that Apu is technically the reason that Kid ended up having to fight against Kaido in the first place, before he even had wanted to fight against Kaido. I would have liked to hope, again, this Kid we're talking about here, I would have liked to have hoped that had Kid wanted to attempt to go against Kaido first, that Killer would have been able to talk him down instead of like trying to go after Shanks first. Because, Big Mom and Kaido and Blackbeard all have their devil fruits. But, Shanks didn't, and, out of all of them, I don't know. Kid may be able to do some damage to Blackbeard to a degree, but I don't think he would have been able to defeat Blackbeard. But, so all of that. And, one of the things that we end up seeing is, Kid attacks Apu with it wasn't Punk Rotten. It was one of the other ones where Punk Gibson, I think is what it was, where he just attacks him and just like uses the giant metal hand that he's built up with all of the weapons and just like swats Apu out of the sky, which he rightfully deserves. Yeah, Apu is my least favorite out of all of the supernovas. Even kind of before, I mean, like his Devil Fruit's interesting with the music and everything, but I don't really care. And of course, Hawkins gets thrown in there too. I didn't have a huge interest in Hawkins, but yeah. And then of course Kid has to deal with like Hotshot and some of the other numbers and stuff like that. And then of course eventually Kid, Luffy, Zoro, and Law and Killer are all working their way through the castle at various points in time, trying to get up to the roof so they can fight against Kaido and Big Mom. And Kid and Killer are dealing with different gifters, and while they're running around, Kid is just using his magnetic powers to just gather up all of the different scrap and weapons and everything like that he can. Which admittedly, all the gifters are there. You take away a lot of their weapons. The gifters and waiters and pleasures and everything are there. So you take away a lot of their weapons if they have metal weapons and stuff like that. Also get, Kaido's probably just got random stuff sitting around that he can gather up and use as weapons and stuff like that. And we see that him running around and gathering up all of these weapons. And we also see some of the other, we see like Heat and Wire at various points in time, like fighting a couple of times. Not too often, but they're like on the live stage for fighting with some of the other, fighting against the Beast Pirates and stuff like that. I was trying to remember if we saw anything of like, I don't think we ever saw, no, I was trying to think if we ever saw like Heat or Wire get affected by like the Isoni virus that Queen used. I'm like, that would have been an interesting one to show like one of them or both of them get affected by the Isoni virus. That would have been interesting. Just to like slightly raise the stakes there. Even if it was just like in like one panel where we saw them, or a couple of panels throughout the chapters where we were dealing with the Isoni virus, like seeing some of, either of them affected by it would have been an interesting way of going about it, to just like raise the stakes a little bit more in that regard. But we didn't. That didn't happen. Neither of them got affected by it. And as far as we're aware, none of the other members of Kid's crew got affected by it either. But that would have been interesting if that ended up being the case. Just to, add that in there. They would technically be slightly indebted to Chopper at that point in time anyway. But after the fact, but whatever. Eventually they, of course, reach the roof, which is where, of course, Kaido and Big Mom are, and that's where you, of course, get the great big, the supernovas spread with, Killer and Zoro and Kid and Law and Luffy in the middle and everything, and, all of them there ready to fight against Kaido and everything. And I do gotta admit, I do love the whole fight that they show between all of them working together and kind of against each other at times, against, Kid, against Big Mom and Kaido and everything. Zoro and Killer team up at one point in time to deal a fair amount of supposedly deal damage to Kaido with, Kid, with a Killer using his giant scythe blades and everything like that against Kaido. And, other things like that. We see, of course, Kid and Law having to work together to try to get Zeus away from Big Mom. And, of course, trapping him inside of the box, the metal box that Kid made, and then Law roomed him into. So I love that bit. And, a few other things that we see happen up on the roof. There's a fair amount of other stuff. They see that Luffy is affected if he uses his hotkey too much. He gets knocked out for, is kind of useless for about 10 minutes. And Zoro and the others work on protecting him against that, during that time frame, against Law, or against Big Mom and Kaido and everything. So we get these great, offensive and defensive moments. We see Kid using his giant Punk Rotten, which is the giant, like, cyborg type thing that he makes, robot type thing that he makes, mech, that I really liked the design of. I thought that was pretty cool. That might be my favorite one out of all of Kid's attacks, is that. And so we see those moments where he's fighting against Big Mom and Kaido, and, Law and the others are using their, power, your skills and everything like that as well. And, Killer gets some hits in against, Big Mom and Kaido as well. And then, of course, when Law and Kid are able to trap Zeus, then they're able to knock Big Mom and Napoleon and Prometheus off the side of Onigashima by working together, and they fall, and of course she comes back with Hera later, but at that point in time, Kid and Killer like ran off to go and deal with her, and then eventually, we know that Law had to room down and like get, Zoro out of the way, and Luffy's dealing with Kaido at that point in time, and of course stuff happens up on the roof and everything. More with Luffy versus Kaido, and then Yamato versus Kaido, and then Luffy comes back, and blah, 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 blah. But during that time frame is, of course, when Kid and Killer are running through the halls of Onigashima, and we know that Kid shows up and finds Big Mom, and actually technically saves Nami, Usopp, and Tama from Big Mom, because Kid is able to attack her with Punk Gibson, and get her attention, as opposed to her trying to take Tama away from Nami and Usopp, which allows them to go off and have Tama make her announcement to have all of the gifters that are now under her control help the Straw Hats against the rest of the Beast Pirates. And then this is where we have Kid and Law ready to have their big fight against Big Mom, and of course Kid shows up, or Law shows up to help. I would say Law is more the heavy hitter, and then Kid does help at times. I do admit that. Kid is useful and probably a very imperative thing in trying to defeat Big Mom. We know that he uses his power to make the giant damned Punk, the railgun, and he uses that to attack Big Mom, and I think that is the attack that breaks her arm. I think that one is the attack that breaks her arm. Which, I mean, hey, that attack was able to break the bones of Big Mom and make her use some of her own power to fix it. So I'm like, that's already something. And then, of course, we also see during this battle that Kid has awakened his devil fruit, and he uses his assign on Big Mom in order to make her, the magnetic part, and then so much of the different structural integrity of Onigashima at that point in time is just pulled onto her with all the different beams and everything like that are part of the buildings in Onigashima are just pulled onto her, and they pin her down. Yeah, she uses her power to turn them into homies and make them obey her, but that gives Kid and Law more time for for Law to activate his awakening and then use his powers on her. And then, of course, between the two of them, they are able to cause more damage to her. At the same time, we know that this battle is also happening at the same time that Killer is dealing with Hawkins, because Kid keeps getting affected by stuff and he doesn't know why. Like, his head starts hurting, he keeps getting cuts, and he doesn't know where they come from because they're not coming from Big Mom at that point in time. And he's just like, why do I keep feeling this pain? What keeps going on? And we cut to where we see Killer, who fighting against Hawkins. And it's revealed that Hawkins has made his last straw doll that he has. He's using that to link himself to Kid, so any attacks, any damage that is done to Hawkins is then transferred to Kid. So, that's why Killer can't just bring himself to just like slaughter Hawkins, because he'll attack his own captain. And that's where the damage will go. And so we get like this great scene, and it was just done in the anime, and I think they did an amazing job with it, with how they show that, yes, as I said, Killer has put all of his chips on Kid. He's like, I don't care. He's basically like, even if it leads to my death, I am going to follow Kid. He is my captain. He is my friend, and I am going to follow him however far I go, even if it leads to my own death. And Killer, again, showing that he is actually quite clever, figures out that, well, if I attack Hawkins and it doesn't have any place that the damage can go on Kid, then I can then fight Hawkins, and it'll like eliminate this connection with the straw doll. So that's where he's like, well, I'm just going to go for Hawkins' left arm because Kid doesn't have one. There's nothing there for it to affect. Yeah, it makes, Killer and Kid, Killer gets this great scene where, slices off Hawkins' arm and everything, his left arm. Yeah, left arm. And then that causes Kid's left arm to just kind of plop, because it's the middle arm. It's not his real arm. So it goes plop. And Kid's like, what the heck? Oh. Okay, we're good. Let's back to fighting. And he feels better because he's no longer connected to Hawkins, because Hawkins has now had that amount of damage has been given to him, and the dolls can only take so much damage, either before they die or before they're just no longer connected to Hawkins. And also possibly using the fact that there was nowhere for the damage to go from Hawkins to Kid just meant that it just got transferred to Hawkins instead, where it's supposed to be. And then that allows Killer to then, defeat Hawkins. And, he's like, you go get him, partner, and whatever. Again, cheering Kid on at that point in time. During this time frame in the anime, we also see some of the other Kid pirates off in the background, like they're watching the fight between Hawkins and Killer. So we see some of them in the background. They're now named. I don't remember which ones they were. I apologize. It's not Heat and Wire. Again, don't know exactly where Heat and Wire are at this point in time during the fight on Onigashima. And I just realized this video was probably longer than I intended it to be, but I don't care. I'm going to keep going. I'll have a longer video to edit and put up and for people to watch. So you can get to listen to me ramble about Kid and Killer for a while. And Heat and Wire and blah, 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 blah. All the other ones for a little while. We see the rest of that battle. Killer is able to defeat Hawkins, and then we cut back to where Big Mom, where Kid and Law are facing off against Big Mom. And during this time frame, they are able to defeat Big Mom by working together and utilizing their awakenings to the best of their ability in order to cause internal damage, and then for her to eventually fall through the hole with all of the bombs and the Kamazo and everything else on top of her, which is one of the other reasons she's able to be defeated, because of all of that. And, so she's gone. And we know that Kid and Law do hear the announcements about, like, Luffy has been defeated, and then, seeing, Kaido show up through the roof and, try to, like, scare everybody that's in the, scare everybody that's within, the hall at that point in time. And then we know, we also know that during the fight with Big Mom, that's when she makes Misery, and then Kid and Law are able to withstand Misery and, still defeat Big Mom and everything like that, and drop her through the hole in the bottom of, underneath Onigashima, through the hole into the center of the island or whatever, into the volcano, wherever she landed. Wherever that landed her. And we know that Kid and Killer do hear, like, the announcements about Luffy defeating, getting defeated by Kaido. And then, when all the water from Raizo goes through the castle, goes through Onigashima in order to quench out all the fire and everything like that. Kid and Law and Killer are, protected by their crews and everything like that, so they don't drown. Then after the whole battle is done, after, Kid and Killer have finished up their respective battles with their respective opponents, and then, Luffy is able to defeat Kaido, and everything's done, and they're just able to, they saw what Luffy did. He was the one to defeat Kaido. Yes, Kid and Killer and Law were helpful in the fact that they did help deal damage to Kaido while they were up on the roof and fighting him. And of course, Killer defeated Hawkins, and then of course Kid is there helping deal with Big Mom and everything like that. I still say most of the credit goes to Law, but there's also other extenuating circumstances that come into play with the Kanzen bow and, good tactics and the bombs and everything like that coming into play against each other to deal with Big Mom. And then, Kid and Killer, after the battle, they're happy and happy that Kaido's been defeated and everything, and just, like, rejoicing in that and everything. And again, as I stated, the differences between Luffy, Law, and Kid is that Luffy was doing it to help Wano. Law was doing it to help Wano. Yes, it helped them in their bigger scheme of, like, Luffy wants to become king of the pirates, and, Law does, he doesn't like seeing these injustices in the world, to a degree. And Kid is the one that was just doing it for his own purposes of just, like, I'm going to go up against Kaido because I want to defeat him because he humiliated me already and I want to get my revenge. And he is helpful in getting his revenge, but he's ended up taking out Big Mom, who also he'd had a conflict with before, but, that's just how that went. And they rejoice in the victory of the Battle of Onigashima. And then we cut to, the week later, after Luffy and Zoro have woken up and all the crew, Kid and Law and their crews, their ships have been fixed by Usopp and Frankie and stuff like that. And they get the newspaper from, the outside, because now they're able to get a hold of that. And they find out that Luffy, that Kid, Law, and Luffy all now have bounties of 3 billion berries, which, is a lot. The 3 billion berries, and that Luffy is now considered the emperor and Kid and Law aren't, which I'm like, I think Law took it slightly better than Luffy, considering that, better than Kid, because Kid's exact answer was basically, Kid's response was, well, I'm gonna go to the Flower Capital and take Luffy's head, and then I'll be the next Yonko, which is basically what Kid tried to do. He heads off into the capital, shows up, tries to fight Luffy, just gets distracted. Hopefully Killer was able to pull him away. I was like, Captain, look, they have our food. Let's go over here and eat. Let's not fight Luffy right now. He deserves to rest. He's fine. Come on, Captain. It's like why are helping pull Kid away. Once all of that happened. And then, of course, we know that several days later is when they all leave at the same time. They all pick their different destinations, based on the different routes from the log pose. And Luffy and Kid wanted to go to the same island, and then they had to draw straws or whatever it was, rock, paper, scissors, and they went to different islands. And of course, Luffy ends up going to Egghead. Law goes to Wiener Island, whatever it's called, goes there. And Kid, of course, ends up, his path ends is what leads him to Elbath. We know during this time frame that Kid's crew was also given copies of the road poneglyph from Wano, because he was instrumental in helping take down Kaido and Big Mom and stuff, and him and his crew. So, they're given those, or given that one, and then he already had Big Mom's. I don't think they would have given him the one from Totland, and definitely not the one from Zoe. So he would have 2 of the different road poneglyph etchings. And then, of course, this is where he mentions, the man marked by fire, which we're assuming at this point in time is Saul. And then, of course, all 3 crews leave at the same time. And I don't remember whose stupid idea it was, but it's either Law or... Well, it's not Law. Law just wanted to go down the Moga report initially. It's just like, well, let's go down this way. It's safer. And then Kid and Luffy are just like, nope, we're going to jump off the side of the waterfall. And Kid's like, damn it. I guess I get to jump off the side of a waterfall with these idiots in our ships. Why am I like this? Just the Beppo and Penguin and Sachi in the background. Captain, this is not necessary. We can go down the other way. It's okay. Kid Law, no. I can't be outbraved by these idiots. Just don't do it. And it's like Kid, Law, Luffy, just all off the side of the waterfall at the same time, which is just funny. I love that. Just whee! Down they go. And then they all go in their own different directions. Luffy, Egghead, Law, Wiener Island, and then of course Kid is heading off to Elbath. Whether or not he knew that was where he was going is left up for debate. Considering the fact that he has had a conflict with Shanks before, and that Kid and Killer were in the Grand Line, were in the New World for 2 years before Luffy and the others showed up, and even in the time frame that Luffy and the others have been in the New World, they've gone to a fair number of islands, or done a fair amount of traveling already. So Kid and Killer, having been in the New World for 2 years, even with, having to have dealt with, Shanks and Big Mom and Kaido in that time frame, have still probably seen a fair number of islands. Kid even had himself and Killer set up on one of these other islands that was like, this is like where our little home base is. And that's where they had the alliance meeting. But, you know, so it would make sense that Kid may know that maybe he knew that it was leading into Elbath and he just didn't want to say that that was where it was going to lead him to. And he knew that that was where he was heading, maybe because they'd been there before while they were traveling around the Grand Line or traveling around the New World. I don't know. But he ends up at Elbath, and this is where we are caught up to where we are now, where Kid shows up at Elbath. He wants to pick a fight with Shanks, and Shanks wants to parlay. Shanks, like, he's like gonna send Rockstar out and be like, hey, you can drop your road poneglyphs, and if you really want to fight, let's go to a different area, so you're not going to be causing problems in my fleet, you're not going to hurt my friends, and you're not going to hurt this island that is under my protection. There's another island around here we can fight on and deal with it there. That is not Kid's intention at all. Killer even tries to talk him down from it, which does not go well for any of them. Shanks won't, because Kid won't listen. He's just like, I'm going to do this or I'm going to die. I'm going to fight against Shanks and I'm going to win, or I'm not going to win and I lose anyway. And yes, ego coming into play with the fact he's like, you know, I helped take down Big Mom and blah, 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 blah. And I helped take down Kaido, blah, 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 blah. You know, I've got my awakening now. Maybe he didn't have that the first time he fought against Shanks. And he has it now. And he's just like, oh, I'm going to try to use this again. I'm going to try this now and try better. It doesn't happen. We're well aware this does not happen. He, you know, makes up his punk damned punk giant railgun, gets ready to fire that, and, you know, right at Shanks' allies who are trying to stop him. And that's when Shanks shows up and just, you know, commissary, you know, defined departure right at the Victoria Punk, right at Kid and Killer. Takes him out, destroys the giant railgun in the process, knocks Kid and Killer both out. The rest of the crew, Wire, and the rest of them are just like, we're sorry, here, take this, take the poneglyphs, we'll leave, we're done, we surrender, have mercy. Shanks is in no mood for mercy, obviously. I don't even know if we see him actually take the poneglyphs, but he jumps off the ship. And then Dory and Bragi use Hakoku Sovereignty and just rips right through the Victoria Punk. Gone. Gone, gone, gone. And all the Kid pirates fall into the ocean. And it's, you know, the narrator comes on and says, you know, the Kid crew has been eliminated. Is no longer there. He's gone. And yeah, they fell into the water. At least two of their crew members, their captain and their second in command, have devil fruits, meaning that they are sinking. And unless the rest of the crew are able to grab them and pull them out of the water and get them somewhere and get them treated for the wounds that they just got from being knocked out by Shanks and taking the divine departure, we're probably not going to see the Kid pirates again, if not ever, then for a while. Unless Oda wants to show us them washing up somewhere. You know, if Kid had just waited, if he'd, like, talked with Shanks and been like, okay, well, I'm not going to surrender to you, but I still want to fight you, type of a thing. Shanks could have been like, okay, fair enough. We'll go over to one of these other islands. We'll fight there. You, me, your crew, my crew, however you want to do this. You leave my allies out of this. You leave my friends out of this. We'll do this. We'll fight. And we'll see what happens. And Kid and Killer and the rest of the crew, or other parts of the crew, may show back up again. We don't know. They could survive. They could try to rebuild. Try to get stronger again, try to build themselves back up. We don't know. We will see what happens. I will be interested to see if they're able to come back from this. Probably not anywhere near as strong as they were before. Hopefully not nearly as cocky as Kid was before. Hopefully he's took some lessons in that regard and is able to actually, you know, improve upon himself in that regard. Because there's no way I can't see Kid wanting to be anybody's underling. I can't see him because he didn't want to be Kaido's underling. And he probably would have gotten a pretty damn good, pretty dang good, setup in Wano had he agreed to work for Kaido the way that Apu and Hawkins did, the way that Drake did. Yes, Drake was faking it, but still, you know, he could have very easily done that and would probably not given the position of one of the one of the headline, or well, would have been a headliner, but probably not one of the all-stars or any of the Toby Ropo, but would have been given a pretty good position within Wano at that time had he agreed to do that. And he didn't. He's like, no, I'm not surrendering. I'm not working for anybody else. You got to defeat me if you want me down. And Kaido defeated him, and now Shanks has defeated him. Had Kid, had Kid at least done the honorable thing and like not attacked Shanks' allies, had, gone and, battled with Shanks on a different island or whatever, and, Shanks still defeats him or whatever, takes his other arm, whatever you want to go with. Had he done that, Shanks may have offered him the choice of like, okay, you fought me twice now. Well, you've dealt with my crew twice now. You can either, I'm impressed with your power, you can come and work for us, be one of our allied crews, or I can let you go, but if you ever show back up, show your face around here again, and and you're coming to fight, you're not going to get out of it that easy the second time, or the third time, or however many more times you want to show up here. Because it is literally like what Dory and Broggy said, where it's just like, you show up pointing cannons at our home and firing them, and causing problems, you can't expect us to not fight back. You are showing up at an island that is under the protection of one of the Yonko, that is an island full of giants. You cannot expect yourself to not be attacked in this regard if you're showing up to cause problems. Had Law shown up here, I don't think he would have been trying to fight Shanks. He would have just been like, oh, this is where Shanks is. I don't think I'm ready to try to take on Shanks yet. I'm going to turn around and leave. Had it been Luffy, I mentioned this before, had it been Luffy that shown up, I don't think Shanks would have necessarily welcomed him 100% with open arms, but he's certainly not going to show up and just start attacking Luffy and his crew. And Law is definitely smart enough not to do that, and Shanks probably wouldn't just start attacking Law's crew either, in that regard. Also, Dory and Broggy and Remo and Kashi probably wouldn't be exceedingly wanting to try to attack Luffy and his crew had they showed up. But this is what happened with Kid, and this is where Kid is left at the moment, possibly resting on the bottom of the ocean floor. If we ever need full confirmation that Kid is dead, if someone else shows up and has Kid's powers, has his devil fruit, then we know that Kid is officially dead and most likely Killer as well. And the rest of the Kid pirates may have been scattered to the four winds for all we know. They could show back up again. Kid and Killer could easily show back up again. A couple of new scars. However the case you want to put it, they could show back up again. But I have no idea when that's going to be. If that's going to be in something later on. If it's going to be, in the next couple of chapters. Probably not, but, So that's just kind of my retrospective on the Kid Pirates and just my opinions about them. And I wanted to throw one more quote on here. So the quote is from Kid again. I don't remember exactly where it takes place in the series. I don't remember if this is when some of the stuff when Kid is first introduced or if this is later on in the series or whatever. But it's, on our journey up to this point, we've been laughed at and ridiculed whenever we mentioned getting our hands on the One Piece. And each time that happened, I slaughtered everyone who laughed. But what lies ahead is a sea of death for those who don't got the guts to mention don't got the guts to mention it. Let's meet again in the New World. So this is like when he's getting ready to head off to the New World. So probably something like either a reference, saying something to like what happened with Luffy at Marineford or whatever. And, Kid got a decent way into the New World. You got to give him that. He got further than a Rouge, to a degree. Technically, he got further than Bonnie's crew did, but you know, we'll see what happens. He definitely got further than a poo at this point in time. And Hawkins, but he's kind of taken out of the game now. So he's off the board. If he shows back up again, we'll see how Oda decides to work with that. Because it's not like Oda couldn't do that. It's his story. But we'll see how he would do it and how the fans would react to it. So, some additional scenes in the anime with Kid and his crew. As I said, if like they want to have like some stuff where they show Kid like use Conqueror Hockey Blast against Big Mom or something like that, if they want to do that, I'd be okay with having some of that in there just to show him use it a little bit, or show some other stuff where we see some of the other members of the crew, and have them pop up. That would be fine as well. But you know, I don't know what else we'll see from them, but that's what I expect. Might get some other more reactions out of the crew during like when this happens in the actual anime, when the fight between Shanks and Kid and stuff like that happens in the anime. I say fight, slaughter, but yeah, that's what I have. This video ended up being longer than I wanted it to be. Sorry. But that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and now I get to go have fun and edit the hour and 16 some minute long video that I did, and I gotta have fun with that. Also, I'm putting this on the end here. The video is called Kid in the Gang. I was going out for play of Cool in the Gang. If you had no idea what that meant, just, I don't know, Google them. They're a singing group, boy band type thing. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.